Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Addiction Help Podcast, where we talk about the latest in news, sports, and entertainment as it pertains to addiction, addiction recovery, and mental health. I am your host, Dan Hauser. With me today for episode 5, as always, is Jessica Miller, the editorial
Hey.
director of addictionhelp.com. Jess, how are you doing today?
Good. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Can't really
Yeah.
complain. So really quick before we get into our usual routine of the show for today, I just would like to take a moment to thank Jess for running the show on her own last week in a pinch. So thank you, Jess, for doing that. And also thank you for sharing your
My
story.
pleasure.
Thank you for sharing your story with not just myself, but all of the audience. I know that couldn't have been easy to share that with everyone, but it was a very powerful story. It was a very important story, especially considering the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it was absolutely something that hopefully everyone that listened to last week's show, it resonated with them and they were able to take something from that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know you and I have talked about that personally, the two of us. Is there anything that you didn't know or I feel like you probably knew most of it.
I did know most of it. There were some of the more
Yeah,
intricate details that obviously I didn't know, just because those are
that's fair.
some stuff that you kind of shared as far as maybe part of it was backstory and part of it was to just kind of
True,
give
true, true.
everyone an idea of what was going on. But even though I did know a
Yeah.
lot of it, it was still very powerful. It was still very moving and meaningful to me, even though I had heard it before. So it didn't change
Thank you.
my
I
outlook on
appreciate
it.
that.
But anyway, back to the normal vibe of the show. So just a quick
I
reminder to
know. I'm
everyone.
too on the spot. Please.
Just a friendly reminder to everyone that's listening. Obviously, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, rate, review, all those fun things that you can do to help us out to spread the word about our show. And of course, um, word of mouth is the most important thing. If you have enjoying what you're listening to for the first 4 episodes and now episode 5, please share that with your friends and family and let them know that you're enjoying listening to what we talk about and that they should check it out as well. I know I've had several people in my life reach out to me and tell me how much they enjoy the show and that they have shared the
Same.
links to some of the episodes with others. So hopefully everyone that
Nice.
is listening has been enjoying the first 4 episodes and enjoys what we have in store for episode 5 today.
Also,
So
questions and suggestions. If there's stuff that you guys are interested in within the whole addiction recovery mental health field, I mean, that is a huge umbrella. So if there's something that you're curious about, let us know and we'll cover it. We'll talk about it.
absolutely. And I know specifically because I have Spotify and I use Spotify. I know for any of you listening to this in your
Mhm.
Spotify app on your smartphone, at the bottom of the episode today, there's a little thing that says Q&A down there. You can click that and bring that up and share some feedback or any information you have. Same thing with YouTube. Obviously, on the YouTube channel, you can leave any comments, suggestions, feedback, questions, anything you might have. And quite frankly, if there's a topic that you would love us to touch on, please share that as well. And we would love to hear those. And if it's something that we both want to discuss as well, we will absolutely use that for a future episode.
For sure.
So absolutely, we love feedback and we love you guys to be involved in the process of this show as much as we are. So please feel free to share anything that you might have with us. But on that note,
All
we
right,
are
let's get
going to
into
hop
it.
right into today's topics. Our first topic today, I would like to say on the front end before we get started on this topic, while the Netflix special has been out for a couple weeks now and people have had some time to watch, I know not everyone watches content the second it comes out on some of these streaming platforms. So
Yep.
our first topic today, we are going to talk about John Mulaney's new Netflix special. If you have not seen it yet, we are going to, of course, try to do our best not to spoil it for anyone. But of course, there will be some things that will be discussed just in the nature of the conversation that may be considered a spoiler to some people. So if you have not seen it yet and you don't want to run the risk of any sort of spoilers, you're more than welcome to skip to the next topic we talk about today, and then you can come back to this discussion after you have seen it. So, but for everyone else and for anyone
Oh,
who is not worried about being spoiled, we'll give you a couple seconds now to skip ahead for anyone who doesn't
yeah.
want to be
I
spoiled.
know.
And
Now is the time.
yeah, now is the time. So skip ahead
Exit
now if you
now.
don't. Exactly. So, and on that note, anyone who has not skipped ahead yet, let's jump right into today's topic, which is that John Mulaney Netflix special. So I actually did
Yep.
watch it the day it came out. I love John Mulaney. I think he
Nice.
is absolutely hilarious.
So
I
does
know
my
it's
sister. Like, I mentioned it to her and she was like, "Oh my god, I love him." And I said, like, "I honestly didn't know I'm like the other half, I think, of
yeah.
people who I didn't know who he was until the chaos that happened that he kind of talks about in his special."
Well, as soon as I watched it, I remember, like, the first thing I did when I was done is I immediately texted you and Chris and was like, "You guys need to watch this, like, now. It is
Yeah.
amazing."
Yeah, you did.
So,
You did.
it
You're
was
right.
fantastic. Um,
Yep.
I couldn't stop laughing through it. He's such a talented and great stand-up comic to begin with, but then, the fact that he went in to share the story and the way he did it, it was just and what helped me my ability to kinda laugh at it is obviously we know the end of the story, which is that he did go get help, he is in recovery, so now it's kinda like you can it's almost like when you see those car crash videos, it's like if you know going into watching it that everyone kinda made it out okay, you can kind of marvel
Yeah,
at, like, the
right,
car
that
flipping
it's a good
50
ending.
times.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and you can just kinda marvel at
But it's
the
okay because right.
because you know the end
So
story and that nobody died and everyone came out okay. So I think the fact that we knew
right,
obviously because he was doing the special, he came out of everything okay, uh, kind of allowed me
right,
the more of a comfort level to kind of laugh at it. But real quick for those
right,
who
exactly.
have not seen it yet and did not skip ahead, he did this special about essentially his process of his substance abuse and addiction issues that we learned in the special he's essentially been going through since he was 13 or 14 years old. For the most part, he was pretty
Yeah.
good at hiding it, from the
And
world. Not
wasn't aware that it was really a problem
exactly,
until,
exactly. But it
you
was
know
he struggled with not
yeah.
just cocaine abuse and addiction, but also substances that he was legally prescribed to. And we've talked about so much in previous episodes and on addictionhelp.com that
Yeah.
addiction doesn't just happen to those that take street drugs. People can suffer from addiction and substance abuse from drugs that they're legally prescribed to by a doctor that they're taking for real ailments and that they might develop an addiction to through no fault of their own. So, in addition to his
Or
cocaine problem,
alcohol to that
or
point,
or of course alcohol too as well. So not only did he
because
have his
it's
cocaine,
legal and yep.
yeah, so not only did he have his cocaine struggles, but he also struggled with addiction to legally prescribed medication. So he went into that and the kind of the backstory of it. He talked about the intervention that his friends did for him, and then his
Mm,
time in rehab, which to me I was the most interesting part. And we'll get into this more in a little bit, but you know, as I've talked about a million times now on the show, I haven't personally gone through the struggles of addiction. So while I've researched it and studied it and written about it for a long time, and I know the process and how everything goes, for him to shine some light into kind of the intricacies of the daily things that he experienced while he was in rehab, that to me, I think was the most interesting because those were things that I was actually still learning. And to hear him discuss it from his very unique perspective of this is what happened to me when I was in there. Like, once again, not to spoil too much, but that Outback story, like, yeah, when you're in rehab, you can't just go on DoorDash and order Outback and have it delivered to the
right,
facility,
and order food.
Yeah, and it's just like,
Why?
but things you wouldn't necessarily think of unless you've been through it yourself. Those were some of the things
Exactly.
where it was like, wow, I hadn't really thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense now. Yeah, you can't just order takeout DoorDash and have it delivered to the facility. Yeah, I feel like that would kind of make sense because they
Right,
need
because
to be
then
able to
you could
know
potentially right, you could
hide something
potentially
in
be
it.
ordering drugs and, like, if you tip, this delivery driver, if you know the person that works there and it's
Yeah,
somebody like, any number of ways that you could basically be getting drugs into the place, which not only risks your sobriety and recovery, but everyone else that's there, you know?
exactly, exactly. And
Like, I wouldn't have thought of that either, but, like, dang,
it makes
that's
sense though. But once he
that's
described it and explained why he was told he couldn't do it, it made sense. It's like, you know what? Yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense. Obviously, these facilities need to keep track of everything that's coming in and out of their facility, and that includes
yeah.
takeout food and anything else where substances of abuse could essentially be hidden and that may look innocent enough like a takeout box, So, um,
Actually, one of the things that I didn't think about when I was doing early writing about, for addiction help on the different levels of care that you can get at different facilities, and a lot of places will confiscate mouthwash from you
mhm,
because of the alcohol content, and hand sanitizer is another one because of the alcohol content. And it's like stuff that you wouldn't think of, and a lot of people, like even coming in, don't necessarily, you know, that's not on their mind really.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
just thought that was
pretty much.
interesting
I mean,
too.
that mouthwash is for most people. Mouthwash is just you just use it throughout the day, like you don't even think twice about it. But another thing
Right,
too
it's a
that
hygienic thing.
he mentioned too was that even his drugs that he had been legally prescribed from a doctor, he wasn't allowed to bring those in. They had to confiscate those as well. And so that was another thing that, yeah, I've kind of known
They're
about that
Klonopin.
from my time doing the research and everything. But that's another thing that people, if they're going into rehab for the first time, they might not think, well, wait a minute. I understand that I have this addiction to, fill in the blank of whatever it is, but like, what about my ADD medication or my anxiety medication? Like those are just things that I use on a daily basis, but you can't necessarily
Right.
use those. Or if you do need
So
to use those when you're in there, they have to be the ones that the facility has to be the ones to
yes,
administer those to you. You can't just
that's the
keep those
key.
pill bottles on your bedside table like you would if you were at home.
Yeah, I don't want anybody listening to this to panic and be like, "Well, like, how am I gonna survive?" Like me, I take Lexapro, and so that's not a controlled substance. You can't hide from Lexapro, but they would be the ones to continue to give me that. So if there is a prescription medication that you have a valid prescription for that isn't a controlled medicine, that isn't something that you need to be recovering from usage, like that's part of the care you receive,
Well,
especially at a facility that you stay at like he did,
that's
that type
part
of
of
rehab, because there are different
well,
levels of rehab.
absolutely. While most people think of medication assisted treatment as here are medications to help you with detoxing and your withdrawals and your addiction, part of medication assisted treatment also is keeping up with your prescription medications that you may have been taking that aren't controlled substances that
Right.
you need to stay up on. But obviously, they have professionals there that will administer that to you.
Yeah.
Another story that really stood out to me, and once again, not to try to spoil it too much for people. So if you have not watched it yet, this will make more sense to you after you've watched it. But the
Right.
Rolex story that he told, where he was essentially stealing money from himself
Bro.
so he could go get his cocaine. Like that was like,
Right. So the TLDR for people who haven't watched
yeah.
it, don't have any interest, is basically his idea was, how do I get cash from myself without alerting
Well,
basically my accountant, etc.
before that, one of his early ways that he thought he could stop or he could cure his addiction or stop the cocaine use was essentially go having his doctor and his accountant be in communication, and
Like
essentially
accountability, right.
he would essentially have to ask permission to get money and have to tell them what he wanted his money for. So
So
essentially
right,
one
he
day
was trying to put these fail safes in place, and then like an addict, and that's not, I'm not using that as a dirty word. That is, a lot of self-proclaimed, addicts like prefer to use that word. As an addict, the addiction monster is like feeding off of that and like, no, we need to find another way. So it's you see the struggle that he talks about, where like he would put these things in place, and then the
still break them
addiction
anyway.
monster would kind of like take over, right? And so
Yeah.
basically the Rolex thing was
So
like,
yes.
so
So
I
essentially,
put this fail
yeah.
safe in place, right? So
So essentially, what he
what
did
can I
was
buy
yeah.
and sell?
So essentially, what he did is he told his accountant he wanted $12,000 to go buy a Rolex, and he went and bought the Rolex, and he immediately left the jewelry store and went to the nearest pawn shop to pawn it off for $6,000. And so he essentially
And like,
stole 12,000 from himself, and then took a $6,000 net loss just so he could buy cocaine, which was
right.
just wild.
And
So
I
that's
we're
just
laughing because I think
he
we're
was laughing
laughing in the
about it. I
sense
feel like I can laugh
of
because he was.
right. Because it's ridiculous. Like he was able, and I really appreciated this throughout the special, he was able to see the absolute heinous ridiculousness of that, the absurdity of it. That your addiction takes you to these places of just like, that's ridiculous. Thought is, and he even described like, people think of a Rolex, right, as like a that's a very fine quality device, and he received, very great customer service. Everyone's dressed nicely, and the dichotomy of like just really being like, hurry up. It reminded me, I don't know if you've seen that movie, that Christmas movie, Love Actually,
Hmm.
where there's a character that he's kind of an ass, and he's cheating on his wife, and he's buying his mistress something, and the guy is like, like Rowan Atkinson is the one that's like, oh, let me wrap it for you, and he's like, okay, fine, yeah, whatever, and it's like just this painfully long gift wrap process, and it just kind of reminded me of that
Yeah, because
scene as well,
exactly. And the other, we talk
because
about
he,
the absurdity.
yeah,
Yeah, we talk about the absurdity of some of these things too. When he first touched on the intervention that his friends threw from him. And he talks about in the beginning how he was an hour and a half late to his own intervention because he had to go get
Two
cocaine, and then
hours.
2 hours, sorry, because he had to go get cocaine, and then he had to go to the set of Saturday Night Live to get a haircut because in his messed up state of cocaine mind, he thought that that's where you go get a haircut. So once again, too, it's just also the absurdity of you are such a famous person in life that you're like, oh, I need a haircut. Let me just go to 30 Rock and go sit down in hair and makeup at SNL and just be like, please give me a haircut. But he talks about how he was
Right.
2 hours late to his intervention. And he said, well, I didn't know it was an intervention. Had I known that, I would have been infinity hours late. But had you told me you had cocaine there, I would have been there early to help you set up. So it's just kind of like,
Right.
once again, it's just, and once again, he was able to do it in a comedic way because all his friends that were there were comedians, which that was a jarring thing to me when he talks about how Fred Armisen and all these famous comedians are there and they're not cracking jokes, they're being deadpan
Right.
serious. And I
That
was
they
like,
all
man,
had made a commitment
I'm
ahead of
I'm
time
like,
to do no bits.
but in my
Yeah.
head, I'm thinking, man, if I walked into a room and I saw these comedians and they were being deadpan serious, I might be a little disturbed at what's going on too. It's like that's jarring in and of itself.
Truly.
But
Truly. Did you notice at the end he did actually a
he put all
thanks, like,
everyone's
in the
names in the
credits
bottom.
right before
Yeah,
the I thought that was
yeah,
really
I thought that
nice.
was
That
really
was very
cool.
nice.
That was really cool. And then I think one of the Rolex story was hilarious too. But I think one of the funnier
Mhm.
stories to me was that he talked about when he was in rehab and he finally was able to get to sleep, and Pete Davidson was trying to call him while he was sleeping.
To
And
check
so
on
he
him, right.
he yeah, but he tells a story about how Pete Davidson is the type of celebrity that regularly changes his number. So every few months when he changes his number, he would text John Mulaney, "This is my new number." And so as part of the joke, John Mulaney would just put Pete Davidson's number in his phone as a different random person.
Like,
And so
random.
this particular time, he had the number saved as Al Pacino. So the nurse that is sitting next to his bed while he's sleeping to make sure that he stays asleep is essentially looking at his phone going off, seeing Al Pacino on the
Right.
caller
Well,
ID.
and the problem with the sleeping, just to give a little context, is like, so cocaine's a stimulant. He'd been up for like 50 hours and it was like telling everyone, I'm gonna pretend to go to sleep so that I can escape. And you're like, that's what people do. So they
Yeah, yeah.
posted somebody in his room, made sure he finally crashed. He finally fell asleep. So his phone's going off. It looks like Al Pacino multiple times in a row. This nurse is probably thinking like, who is this dude? And like, why is Al Pacino actually calling him like a million times in a row? So she wakes him up, like, hilarious.
To tell him that Al
I
Pacino
don't
is
want to say
calling him,
too
which
much,
is
but
hilarious because in reality it's actually Pete
right,
Davidson. But then to keep up the facade, he talks to Pete Davidson like he's talking to Al, like he would talk to if it were actually Al Pacino calling him.
right.
Which that I could not. I was dying during that entire story. I could not stop laughing. But brings us to kind of our next topic and kind of the bigger topic I wanted to speak about as it relates to this
Mhm.
um the stand-up special. Obviously, not everyone in life is going to like every piece of content that is out there, and I'm sure there were probably people that were out there
Sure.
that might have watched this and might have felt that what he was doing was in poor taste because he was taking something very serious in that substance abuse addiction interventions rehab and essentially turning it into one giant joke. So what I
Okay.
did want to bring up and say to anyone who might have felt that initial reaction is a major component of substance abuse treatment and ongoing recovery is to have healthy coping mechanisms to address your recovery issues or your addiction issues, whether
Mhm.
it's vices that may come up during the day, any possible temptations, or anything that you might come across in a day that might trigger something in your head because that's what would trigger your use when you were using. And so it's
Right,
important
any
to
number of things,
of
exactly.
course, but it's important to remember that short of something being illegal or physically harming, whatever your choice is that is a healthy coping mechanism that does not involve drugs and alcohol is fantastic. So for John Mulaney, it's I want to do a stand-up special and tell the world what I went through and do it in a joking way. For somebody else, their coping mechanism might be journaling, or it
That's
might be
his
artwork, or it
process,
might
right.
be going for a walk, or it might be going to the gym.
Exercise or exactly.
Whatever it is,
You
as
hear
long as
all
it's
kinds of
something.
stories about that, where people like get into something else. They find something different because let's be real, like we're all out here self-medicating. That word is not always a dirty word. We just want to make sure what we're choosing for self-medication are healthy habits and healthy things, like for me, I've gotten really into like plant care and that kind of stuff versus just like drinking constantly.
It's part of what we do with this podcast. The whole reason why, yeah, we do
Mhm.
touch on very serious topics. And last week aside, just when obviously you shared that your story. I mean, there was no way around not that story not being serious. But for the most part, we try to take these very, very serious topics about addiction, recovery, mental health, and we try to talk about it in more of a lighthearted nature. Because I feel like when you talk about these types of very serious things in a more lighthearted nature, it makes it more relatable. It removes some of the negative
Yeah.
stigma that still exists around it. And it allows people who may not be suffering themselves to be able to empathize and understand what other people are going through more. It's one thing to read about
Right.
pages on the internet, and you do a great job on addictionhelp.com of creating these very important, resource pages and having great information, and you do it in a way that's easily digestible and great for people to read. But everyone likes to digest information in various ways. So for someone
True.
like John Mulaney, he's got a gift. He is incredibly talented stand-up comedian. And if that's the way he wants to talk through what he has experienced and he decides that he wants to share it with
Right. Or
literally the world
process
because
it.
it is on Netflix and that's
Yeah.
what he chooses to do, then at the end of the day, he's not
Everybody
harming
out
anyone.
there.
He's not harming himself and he's not using substances of abuse anymore. So I say all the more power to him. And once again, too, we touched on the beginning, the fact that we knew beforehand that obviously because he was doing this stand-up special, he did go through recovery and he did go through rehab and he is now in recovery. We know that there is that positive light at the end of the tunnel. So it's like you can kind of watch it thinking,
Right.
okay, it's okay to laugh at this if something's funny because we know that he went through the proper channels and he got the help that he needed.
Right. And to be fair, like, that approach is not for everyone. And that's 100%. I'm kind of with you. If I can laugh at it, that is a huge coping mechanism for me. If I can get to the point where I can laugh at something that helps me, not take it so seriously and then maybe not be so hard on myself. Cause he also shares an interview he does. I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to like give everything away, but he shares an interview he does that he doesn't remember anything of. And you can even tell, like, he sounds unhinged in his answers. And you could certainly see a level of him um, really, really understanding and appreciating, like, yeah, he messed up. He made a lot of mistakes and he owns that. And I appreciate that there was that level of ownership, as well as you got to be able to laugh at stuff sometimes because otherwise you would just sit there and beat yourself up all day, and I especially got that vibe when he was kind of sharing pieces from that interview of like him acknowledging this is embarrassing. Funny because it's so bad, and so it's like that dual, like two things can be true at once, right? Like can be bad. It's like a, oh, I can't think of the word. Basically, it's just an example of like you really screwed up here, bud. But it also is true that it's kind of, there are things about it that are funny.
Well, and also, I mean, you and I can talk till we're blue in the face about ways that we can destigmatize substance abuse and addiction issues and remind people that, it's okay to not be okay and that help's available and whatnot. But,
Right.
and this is no knock on us. We don't have even close to the following that someone like a John Mulaney has. And so for someone like him
a
to
hundred
take
percent.
the time and to dedicate an entire special to essentially tell everyone in a humorous way it's okay not to be okay, and you can go get help. And look, I was not okay. I
Right. If
my
I could
friends
do it,
my
right,
friends stepped in
anyone can do it.
and told me I need to go get help. I got help. I came out on the other side. I still have a career. I'm still able to talk to all you people and crack jokes about this. I'm still able to live my life. I still have a family. I still have friends. My friends are even more close. It's just it's a fantastic platform and a fantastic way to bring more attention. And
Mhm.
that's what we constantly talk about on the show, bringing attention to important topics like substance abuse, mental health, and addiction recovery, because it's I feel like a broken record when I say it. It's okay not to be okay. And there are ways that you can
It
get
is.
help to
Being
be
a human
okay.
is hard.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that I think is the biggest thing is that, he didn't have to burn an entire stand-up comedy special with Netflix just talking about his time with his experience with addiction and addiction recovery, but he chose to, and it's great that he did because by doing so, he's able to spread the word to so many more millions of people that may
Right.
not have been aware, not just that he was struggling, but now based off of kind of his description and the stories that he told and things that he did, they might now be able to spot that in someone they know. And then they can go to that person and say, hey, listen,
Fair.
are you okay? Do you need help? What can I do to help you? Let me help you get the help that you need because they might see some of those stories in people that others that they know that they might not have thought about until listening to someone like John Mulaney talk about it.
Right. That because at the end of the day, like, yes, it is a comedy special, but the underlying thread was there was this level of honesty, and it was very raw and very real and open and humble in a lot of ways. And I really respect. I really didn't know much about him before, but after watching this, after you recommended it, I'm 100% a fan for sure.
Absolutely. So once again, for anyone who has already seen it, we hope you enjoyed it. If you are still listening to us at this point, and we did not spoil it to you to the point where you no longer feel you need to watch it. We really do
He tells
recommend
everything
watching
better
it.
than we do anyway, so
Well, of course, absolutely.
yeah, go
So it's
watch it.
the John Mulaney new Netflix stand up special. So please go watch it if you haven't already. It's even if for nothing else. I mean, it's funny, and I think you'll laugh. And it's a really really good stand up special that he put together. But transitioning a little bit, but on a similar note, Jess, when we were kind of brainstorming topics that we wanted to talk about this week, you brought up a topic that was relevant in the news this week, last week being Star Wars, kind of unofficial Star Wars week with May 4th, and then everything going on
Yep.
with that. Why don't you go ahead and kind of take it away as far as setting up our next topic here?
Sure. So, I mean, it's very similar in a way, actually. So, Carrie Fisher, who everyone pretty much knows as Princess Leia, she even jokes that like you're not famous until you've become, a Pez dispenser with your likeness. She was able to get a star on the Walk of Fame, and I think they actually did it on official Star Wars Day, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. Basically, is the joke. And I really wanted to talk about her because I admire her anyway, just because she is somebody that has always been, or always was while she was here, very outspoken about her battles with addiction and mental health. And she is just, to me, such an icon as an advocate for both. And I thought, what a great, obviously relevant topic as well, since she just got honored on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Let's talk about Carrie Fisher. And she, in a lot of ways, I think is very similar to the John Mulaney.
Well, and like John Mulaney, there's another example of taking your fame that you have, whether you necessarily wanted it or not, but you take that fame that you have and that reach that you have and doing something good with it. In the case, with the John Mulaney stand-up special or with everything that Carrie has done, you bring attention to people uh, through your own personal experiences, the struggles that you have gone through, both with mental health and addiction.
Um, so yeah, like I was looking up some things before this just because she's also written a lot as well. The book that I've read so far is called Wishful Drinking. I meant to bring it in here with me so I could flash it. Hey, ADHD, I forgot. But the book is called Wishful Drinking, and it's a really short read. I read it, I think, on a rainy Sunday afternoon. It's really funny, very similar in this sort of very honest, raw, quite self-deprecating. So I do appreciate that she's not hard on herself, but still very honest about her shortcomings, her the times that she's messed up as a result of particularly her addiction. Um, and I love that. Very, again, similar to the way that the John Mulaney special is she ties in humor with this very real, very honest look at herself as a person. Um, there is also kind of like for those of you who are perpetually online like me, a lot of people like to refer to her as Space Mom. She's very outspoken, very, very opinionated, and she said so much about herself when she was alive and was very, very passionate about taking your medication. If you were, prescribed medication for your mental illness, she specifically bipolar disorder. Um, and so Space Mom says, take your meds. And I think for her, there was no shame in needing medication to handle the symptoms of her mental illness. And I just think that's like such a rad message, right? Like how supportive. Space Mom says, take your meds. And it's easy to sometimes feel like, because I've found this before about myself, like you get in your head a little too much and you think like, gosh, my brain is so broken. I have to take medication just to function like a regular person. Like you can get a little too in your head about it. And so having people like Carrie Fisher basically be like, take your meds. You're fine. Take your meds. Face Mom says, take your meds. It's just this level of like approval and support that I think is very universal. That for me has helped even me sometimes think about like, well, Carrie Fisher says I should. So, like it's nice. It's a nice
And
feeling.
it's a reminder too. And, you know, I didn't get to touch on this last week with the episode because, what happened and you jumped on last minute, but, it's a reminder too, while for her answer was to take her meds because those made her feel better. It's the meds there can be a metaphor for do or take whatever you need to do or take to make yourself feel better. So, and this was something that I was going to share
Within
last week.
reason.
Well,
Let's
once
be
again,
clear cut.
legally,
Yes.
and that doesn't involve substances of abuse and does not involve self-harm. But,
Healthfully. Right.
of course, this was, something I was going to talk about last week during our mental health discussion. I was kind of the opposite. I was on a myriad of different medications for my ADD, for my mental health, for everything else. And it got to a point where I was essentially starting to have to take pills to counteract the side effects of the other pills, if that makes sense. So I was
Yep.
taking a pill, and then
Yeah,
the
you
side effects of
medicate the side
taking that
effect.
pill was requiring me to take a second pill to medicate those side effects. And so essentially one morning, now once again, I would like to say, do not try this at home. Do not try this at home. But
Right.
one day I basically
We
woke
are
up
not
and
condoning this.
because at the time as a 17-year-old kid, and this is part of another reason of why it's so important to raise awareness, because as a 17-year-old kid, I didn't know any better. I didn't have any sort of addiction or issues in my family, so I didn't know any better. But basically I woke up one morning and just
Yeah.
said, I'm done taking all of these things. I'm tired of taking a pill to take a pill to substitute another pill. I am done. And so I essentially just stopped. But for me, what was best for my mental health was to essentially no longer take those pills and to find other outlets. So, while she did take her
And that's
pills, and
fantastic too.
meds are great if those are what's great for you, but I think the meds can also be used. It's a reminder that the meds can be a metaphor for, it doesn't actually have to be a physical medication. It's whatever it is that works best for you and your needs.
Can
And
I put
whatever it
you
is,
on the spot and ask you
yeah,
what your quote meds are then? Like
yeah.
what
So I was,
outlets
I was,
were helpful for you?
I was on Ritalin at a young age, and then I transitioned from Ritalin to Adderall as I got a little bit older, and then essentially because of
You were just a kid.
yeah, I was put on Ritalin in the first grade, so and I was all the way through high school. I was on either Ritalin or Adderall, and then as I got older, well, as a kid, I felt like a zombie on the inside. Like it helped me get through
Mm.
school. I was a fantastic student. I was able to get my work done. I got great grades. Everything was great from an academic standpoint, but from internally, I felt like I was sleepwalking every day because these pills were essentially making me not who I was, which to study was okay, but on a daily basis, it was not fun. But and that caused a lot of stress and
Sure.
anxiety in my life. And then as a result of that stress and anxiety and depression, I was then put on Xanax to counterbalance how the Adderall or Ritalin was making me feel. And then so that also
Wow.
came
And
with
if
its
you were
own
already
set.
feeling like zombified, and then the
So it was like
Xanax, that's
double
gonna potentially
zombified.
be
And then that also came with
bless.
its own set of side effects. So essentially one day I just woke up
Yeah.
and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I found other outlets. So
Yeah.
it's important to know that medication doesn't always have to be the answer. And if you aren't comfortable taking medication or you don't like the way it makes you feel, whatever that outlet is that you find, don't be embarrassed by what it is. Don't be ashamed by what it is. Whatever you need to do to make yourself feel good and have an enjoyable life and be, most importantly, a healthy life, because obviously there are things out there that could make us feel good that aren't good for us. So it's a key
Right.
to
We're
whatever
not
makes you
talking about
happy,
that. We're talking about find healthy outlets.
whatever makes you, and it goes back to the John Mulaney thing. His is comedy. Whatever makes you happy and healthy, and you feel that you can live and enjoy your best life, just do it. and you don't have to justify it to anyone, or you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. We talked about this a couple episodes ago when we were talking about sober bars and sober mocktails
Oh,
and
yeah,
being
yeah.
out and about. Whatever makes you feel comfortable, you don't have to explain to anyone. And I'm sorry, we were talking about that
Yep.
with the music festivals. That's what it was. Sorry, with the music festivals. Go and enjoy your life, and you don't have to explain to anyone or justify to anyone
Right. You
what
don't
is
owe
involved in
anyone
living
that
your best life.
justification. Exactly.
You owe nobody an
Right.
explanation. Whatever makes you happy in life, go do it. And so I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest takeaway from both Carrie Fisher's book and from John Mulaney's special, is that they chose those particular outlets to enjoy their life and to make themselves happy. And so just when you can find that outlet, just stick with it and run with it and make the most of it. And I think, I don't want to speak too much for you, but I feel like in this case I can. I think for you and I, this podcast right here is an amazing outlet for us, because it's a way that we can
Truly.
share our
I
stories.
enjoy it so much.
And even if we're
Yep.
not sharing personal stories, knowing that the conversations we have are going to have an impact on those of you out there listening and watching us. And from there, even if it's just one person that listens to one of our episodes and something clicks for them to do something to make themselves better, then we've accomplished
Yep.
our goal and what we set out to do here.
It's the starfish story for me. Do you know that one? This
I
is
don't
so
believe so.
cheesy.
But just in case,
But it's
share it for the
basically,
audience anyway.
I'm going to, whether you like it or not. Basically, it's this parable that there's this guy walking down this beach, and it's after a really bad storm, and the tide is way out, and there are starfish just littered across the beach, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And there's a guy out there. He's going for a walk, and in the distance, he sees someone leaning down and picking something up and chucking it out to the ocean every so far. And so, the dude finally catches up to him, and it's an old man. And he sees, he's like, he's walking, and he'll like pick up a starfish and throw it out to the ocean. And he's looking, and like, there are just 1,000. And he asks him, he's like, friend, what are you doing? And he says, well, I'm putting these starfish back in the ocean. And the guy laughs, and he's like, you see these, like, there's no way that you can get to all of them. And he says, no. And he picks up one and throws it back out. And he says, well, you can't possibly hope to make a difference. And the old man smiles. He leans down, picks up another starfish and throws it out into the ocean. And he says, well, I made a difference to that one. And that, to me, is kind of the key, right? Like, we're not here to help everyone. Our advice and opinions aren't necessarily for everyone, but for that one person that it affects or impacts in a positive way, that's worth it to me.
Absolutely. I had not heard that story, so I'm very happy that you shared it. Even if nobody else in the audience cares about it, I very much enjoyed that story.
They do.
So.
They love it.
And really quick here
Don't
before
you
we
guys,
wrap
you love
up,
it.
Jess, if you want to give the name of Carrie Fisher's book one last time, just for everyone, in case anyone would like to
Yes.
check it out.
So there are multiple. So if you look it up, you'll probably find several. But the one that I've read that I really enjoyed is called Wishful Drink. And in that one specifically, she talks a lot about her bipolar, I guess, like, her journey, essentially, because there's a lot of ups and downs with that. And with her sobriety, she talks about that quite a bit too. That one's very, like, autobiographical, and I think the other ones might be slightly different topics. So fabulous. Highly recommend. Love her.
We highly recommend that Carrie Fisher book. Highly recommend the John Mulaney special. Highly recommend that you doing anything.
So you guys have your weekend set.
Exactly. we also highly recommend doing whatever it is that makes you happy in life, as long as it is both legal and safe and good for you. Obviously, we don't encourage anything that may not be healthy for you. But if there's something out there that you enjoy doing that is healthy and legal and makes you happy, then
Dungeons and Dragons, D&D. If you leave nerd recommendations, I'm your gal.
Well, on the nerd note, that will do it for today's show. Thank you, Jess, as always, for joining me today. Once again, just a reminder, if you like what you once again, just a reminder, if you like what you heard or watched today, please subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or if you are watching this on YouTube, on YouTube, rate, review. And what, like Jess mentioned earlier, please leave us notes, suggestions, ideas, questions, anything you have.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, if there's a topic that we haven't touched on yet that you think that we should, please let us know. We'd be
Yeah.
happy to dive into it, and we'll be happy to
'Cause
give.
there's so much that we can cover, so we'd rather cover something
Absolutely,
sooner than later. If it's like, "Oh, I hope they talk
absolutely,
about
and
this or that," like, let's go.
we'll be happy to give you your credit too, where it is deserved for
I
bringing a topic to our attention too. We're not going to go ahead and steal anyone's work here. We're happy to give credit where it is due. So please share with us anything you'd like us to talk about. And also, as always, if your loved one is struggling, I know we've talked about it a bunch, but if you are struggling with substance abuse addiction or mental health issues, help is always available. There are people out there that want to help you. It is okay not to be okay. Just it's important to find that help and find those out there who do want to help you in any way possible. Findtreatment.gov is a great place where you can find treatment options in your area. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration also has a toll-free helpline, and that's 1-800-662-4357. Once again, that's 1-800-662-4357. And then, of course, addictionhelp.com, where you can find all the great work Jess is doing with all her valuable information and great resource pages that can help you get any more information you may need as far as substance abuse, mental health, addiction, and ways that you can get help for any and all of those issues as well, too. So thank you so much for tuning in today and giving us your time. And as always, we will talk to you guys next week, and have a great week, everyone. See you guys later.
Right.